Thank you all so much for being willing to try this game out for the first time that it's ever been played on Zoom. So normally this game is played in person, and we actually have a giant version of the social discipline window taped out on the floor so that we can step inside of the model and really play around with it. But through this activity, we're still going to have a chance to get into breakout groups and think about what these different approaches look like with real life scenarios. And for the sake of this model, we'll just use one scenario, but usually we'll use 2 or 3 to really get a sense of how this looks in different contexts. So first, to just give a reminder about the social discipline window, which is the model that we'll be working with. So this is a model for understanding different ways of upholding behavioral expectations in a community. So on the x-axis, you'll see support, so moving from low support to high support. And on this y-axis, there's control, but the word I actually really like to use is expectation of behavior. That helps me kind of think of it more. And so moving from low expectation of behavior to high expectation of behavior. So when you have really low support and low expectation of behavior, that's not. So that's the neglectful approach. So just to use a kind of real life example, or maybe not real life, hopefully not. So let's say that my partner who I live with, Sam, isn't doing the dishes. If I were to take a neglectful approach to that issue, what I would be doing is just ignoring it, shrugging my shoulders and kind of walking away. But slowly that kind of resentment is going to build up because I'm not having that expectation of the behavior changing. And I'm also not supporting him at all. I'm just kind of ignoring it. So that's like a neglectful approach. Moving along the x-axis here, if I have really high support but low expectation of behavior, that's a permissive approach, or doing things for him. So maybe I'm saying things like, well, you know, Sam is so busy and he's really got a lot on his plate. He can't be bothered cleaning these plates. And so I just continue to do all the dishes and don't address the behavior, don't have a high expectation, but I'm really supportive of him and understanding of like these different factors that might be contributing to it. And I might even be saying things like, you seem really busy. Can I help you out with anything else? But maybe that resentment is actually growing a little bit in me as I continue to do all the dishes. On moving this direction, if I have really high expectations of behavior and low support, maybe that's going to look like a passive aggressive remark. Maybe it's going to look like silent treatment. Maybe it's going to look like me refusing to do the dishes now and we just have like a huge pile. So having a high expectation of his behavior, but not really supporting him at all in changing it. So what we're going for is this restorative approach, the with, where we're doing something with someone, where we have high support, and so we're asking those questions, having a spirit of curiosity and respect, but also having high expectation of the behavior changing. So that's actually luckily not an issue in my household, but just to use a relatable example. So what we're going to be doing is I'm going to send you into 2 breakout groups, and each group in this case is going to get 2 of these quadrants that they're responsible for. So I'll share a scenario, and your group is responsible for coming up with the response that is representative of, for example, the to and the not, or whatever quadrants that I assign to your group. So when we come back together, you can either act out that response, or you can explain it if you're feeling less of a dramatic flair today. And the other people in our larger group will have to guess which one you're acting out, and we'll kind of place you in the social discipline window so we have a representation of what all 4 approaches look like. So the first scenario for us, the schools-based scenario for this morning, you're a teacher at a middle school. While you were in the bathroom, your student Holly, who's in 6th grade, stole your iPad off your desk. When you came back, she was using it to look at YouTube videos. So there's your scenario. I'm going to send you into breakout groups now, and I'm going to pop into your group to share with you which 2 quadrants on the social discipline window you're responsible for coming up with the response for. Any questions about that before we jump into groups?
Yeah, no, all good.
For those of the viewers of this instructional video, just to know that normally we would have 4 different breakout groups, and so that each group was only responsible for one of these quadrants, one of these responses, but since we have a smaller group today, you guys get to do double duty and come up with 2 different responses. Okay? All right, so I'm going to send you into your breakout rooms. Here we go.
Hello.
Hello, social discipline friends.
Hello.
Hi.
Okay, I'm here to give you your assignment. So you are responsible for the not response, the neglectful response, and the with, the restorative response. What those two responses will look like. And I'll ask you to share the not one first. And don't tell them it's the not, though. They're going to guess that. And then you'll share the with one second.
Okay.
Any questions?
No?
Great.
Thanks for giving us the best ones.
Yeah.
I knew you could handle it.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, what should we do first?
Not came to mind for me. I just thought it was entertaining to think of like the extreme end of not and ignoring the fact that your iPad is missing from your desk on somebody else's table. But I can't imagine that actually being a response like long term. So the one that I came up with was just like casually walking past and taking it back from the student without actually acknowledging that it was ever taken. So I don't know if that it's like not light.
Yeah. Not support. It's not supportive and not. What's the goal?
Not setting any expectations for behavior. So it's all like the social discipline window is really framing what kind of relationship you want to cultivate. So not is completely neglectful of relationship, basically.
Yeah. I think in a case like that, a student who just had the teacher take it back without any, I guess, further response would send a message to that student that they didn't matter at all to the teacher. Like the teacher wouldn't even be giving enough time to acknowledge the student. So I would imagine that the student with that very passive not response would feel very invisible.
Some might say neglected.
Might be the opposite of what they're looking. Yeah, neglected.
So okay.
I'm trying to think. I guess if there's another not option.
My not option, I think when I think of neglectful response or the not box, I think of passive aggression, because I think that the not comes up for people, well, it comes up for a lot of reasons, but one reason could just be, I think in this situation, like someone who's tired of addressing her students or their students' behavior, or tired of other things, maybe. So if this is the iPad, I would say that unfortunately I don't have anybody to demonstrate right now holding said iPad, but I would say, like, maybe the teacher would come in and just let me create a path for myself and just like pick it up and be like, all right, Holly. Right? Like, just not even acknowledge what happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Man, if I was Holly, I would feel very emboldened after that. I'd be like, I paradoxically got a response just then. Like, that was interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's tough to be neglectful when there's an object involved. I think it's tough to ignore behavior if there's some personal connection with an object involved, because it's almost impossible impossible not to address it in some way, shape, or form. Because sometimes teachers address, I would use, I think of teachers in my mom or the Kathy Z response, a lot could be communicated with eyes as well, you know.
Yeah, I think the thing that comes forward with this though is like you can address the object without addressing the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Like I
yeah,
can get my object back and continue neglecting the person.
yeah, yeah. So I think I totally agree, but I think that, well, this is all hypothetical, but eyes express you. If you make a look like if you made a look like knock that shit off look, uh, that is addressing. So you can be nonverbal and address something depending on who you are and how you express it.
So true.
Yeah, it seems like in essence emphasizing the object and neglecting the person can happen at the same time, which would probably be really intense for the person and for the relationship.
Yeah.
We have 15 seconds.
We have 15 seconds. We have to do the with response.
Oh no, this one's so challenging for me.
We would pick it up and ask them, help me understand why you took the iPad off my desk.
Okay, does one of you want to act that out when we come back together? So what we have to do is act it out, and then the other group has to guess which quadrant we're in.
Okay. That sounds
So I
good.
could act out not. Will one of you act out with?
Sure. Does what I just said seem correct or
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah, what both of you said.
I can be the teacher, so we'll act it out. Well, I'm just acting out the teacher role. We don't need a student in this context.
I could be the student in the with.
We'll refer to you. Okay, her name's Sherry or something like that. There.
Ollie.
Holly, Sherry. It's Christmas themes.
I think we'll get bonus points if we do teacher and student acting out together. So let's definitely do that.
Okay.
Welcome back, everyone.
Thank you.
Heyo.
Ready to present?
Yeah.
All right. So we'll come to Kathleen and Ken and Abby's group first. You can share your first response, and then the other team will guess which response you're demonstrating.
Okay.
Okay. I will demonstrate our first response. This, well, what's more like an, okay. This is the iPad in question. Here it is in Holly's hand.
Very good. All right, my team two, what do you think that represents?
Just at a guess, maybe the knot.
Feeling a little bit like the knot box.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So before we move on to the next demonstration, what are the downfalls of that knot approach that was so expertly demonstrated?
We had a quite lengthy conversation about the knot approach and how in an incident like that, you might attend to the object. Like you don't neglect the object, but you neglect the person or the relationship. But then Ken pointed out that like even eye contact in some way is engaging with the other person and sending a message. And in this case, you know, the message being sent is probably doesn't make Holly feel very good, or as Abby said, maybe emboldens her to act out in more ways.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's interesting how it can be both kind of indicate a lack of care. Both the fact that you're not supporting and that you're not having the expectation make Holly feel like, well, might as well do some other things, or I just don't feel fully seen in this classroom. Great. Okay, how about team two with Karen, Glenn, and Jess? Could you share your first demonstration?
Yeah. All right, here we go. Ready?
Your turn.
Oh, I
That's
took
us.
it.
We're good. We're good.
Very nice.
Did you send me out?
I sent you out.
Oh,
Yeah.
I wasn't paying attention.
I like the silent miming approach. So that was Karen as Holly being sent out of the classroom. Oh,
So sad. So sad.
what does that look like? Which response is that, team one?
Very silent too.
Silent two? A silent punitive?
A chaplain too.
Yeah.
Great. And what are kind of the shortfalls of that approach of just sending her out of the classroom?
So there's no resolution at all. The conflict persists. The tension persists.
Yeah, there's no reparation of relationship happening. It's maybe even gotten a little worse.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
She may not even know for what reason she was sent out,
Yeah.
depending on how things were set up beforehand or what the relationship was to the iPads.
It generates shame.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, shame, lack of clarity.
Yeah.
Great.
And I think even with us not using words, that sometimes that there doesn't have to be anything said for someone to get, the point about what's being done to them. So I know because I know there was stuff even when I would have been at school, they wouldn't have been spoken to. Things would have just been grabbed out of your hands. Things would have just taken off you, and there would have been nothing. It would have just said, and then the teacher would have continued on as normal, and there would have been no discussion about it whatsoever. So you're sitting there with the embarrassment of that having been done in front of the whole class, but yet not really knowing. Well, obviously, that they've taken the thing off you, but it was the embarrassment that came as a result of that, and then the raking that you would have taken when you left the class. The rest of the class kind of jumping in on that.
Yeah, it's interesting, like that kind of lack of speech, like lack of even endeavoring to have a conversation really does communicate like a lack of care and respect, a lack of support, just through the absence of anything being said. It's almost worse than something at sometimes. Yeah. Great.
How do you return to your classroom after that?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I had a very similar thought, just that a teacher and a student are going to have another interaction, and I think that there's a lot of probably fear and unpredictability in what that next interaction would look like if you get sent out in that way.
Definitely. Yeah, so we have a difficult time kind of then reintegrating afterwards.
Well,
Let's go to our next demonstration. Back to team one.
Okay, wait a minute, I have to remember here.
Or sorry, this is back to Ken, Kathleen, and Abby. So you have a moment, Karen.
Thank you.
I am the teacher, and Abby is playing Holly in this case study. So, Holly, can you help me understand? I see that my iPad's on your desk. Can you help me understand why you took it off my desk?
One of my really good friends just posted some videos online, and some of the girls in class were talking about it, but we don't have internet at my house, so I hadn't gotten to see them yet.
I gotcha. Do you remember, that's frustrating that you don't have internet at home. Do you remember what our ground rules are that we set up at the beginning of the year around personal property?
Yeah, I know you can't borrow things in your class without asking, and I'm not supposed to touch anything on your desk.
Gotcha. So, all right. So how does this play into that?
I broke the rules. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
All right. So I think we'll cut our scene now.
Okay, what did that look like, team two?
That's hard.
I think that it allowed student Abby to be heard and to have to recognize for herself that she broke the rules, but to know that her motivation was spoken and accepted.
Yeah, so I saw Ken approaching with a lot of support to asking these really respectful, open-ended questions, and I didn't hear any judgment in his tone, so that Abby really felt free to explain what was going on leading up to her making that decision, but still holding that expectation of behavior of here's our guideline for how we're in class together, and reestablishing that. So hearing kind of both of those working. Is there anything that anyone would add to that response to maybe even make it more restorative?
I think if the conversation had continued, and maybe if teacher Ken wanted to go there, he could have asked questions about, like maybe why did we establish this as a classroom norm, and who might be affected by this, teasing out some more of those restorative principles around harms and repairs. Asking student Holly what she might do in the future if she's up against this challenge of wanting to see her friends' videos or Snapchats, for example.
Yeah, TikTok.
TikToks. Great, yeah, so adding a little bit more exploration possibly as the conversation carried on from the demo we saw of what have been the impacts of it and what's the plan for repair and making sure it doesn't happen again.
I think teacher Ken, yay, teacher Ken, could also have told Holly about how it feels to have something taken off his desk. He could ask her how she thinks others were affected, but also tell her how he was affected by seeing it happen.
Oh yeah.
Sharing those personal impacts.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Does take a bit more time, right? But what are kind of the benefits of having approached it in that way?
Holly might come out of that knowing, depending on how old she is, being able to identify ways that she could meet her needs without putting her relationship with her teacher at risk. Yeah, and then they also will have probably developed a little bit more trust in that relationship, having been able to have a mutual exchange under a stressful topic or around a stressful topic.
Yeah, it provides the teacher with the motivation behind the behavior. It's the reason why I lifted this was, rather than assuming that it was done just out of I'm just taking your stuff.
Yeah, Ken has so much more information and relationship built this way than the
The impact on the classroom is it holds the classroom as a whole. It engages everybody in what can be a really valuable learning experience.
Great. So good work, restorative team. Let's go back to group 2 for our final demonstration.
Okay. So who's going to be her? Thank you, Glenn. Hey, who has my iPad? Glenn, you have my iPad? What do you want?
Yeah. It's a really great video on octopus or octopi. I'm not really sure what you taught us.
I'm sure that's something that would be of interest to the entire class. Why don't you come up and share it with everyone, even though that means we won't be able to complete this unit that we have a deadline to complete by tomorrow afternoon. So please come and share it with everyone.
No, you're all right. Here, take it back.
So supportive, Karen. So supportive. What's kind of the shortfalls of that approach?
That was awesome.
I mean, the class gets to learn about octopi, so I feel like it really there's nothing lacking.
Even though it's a math class.
It's science class. I mean, I feel like there's
it definitely creates a you and them. you know, and it's disrespectful, and it does not deal with the issue at all.
Yeah.
No
It could
big deal.
further and, you know, give a you and them to other members in the class as well. If there's relationship issues around in the rest of the class, to see someone being treated sarcastically almost affirms that behavior, to say that it's okay to talk to this person this way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it might erode any sense of Karen having expectations or control over the classroom. You know, it's sort of like those just all went out the window because she's like, oh, who else wants to take over what we're doing right now? And also it's, I mean, I think it was a little confusing because she's like, no problem, we won't do all the things that I'm supposed to be doing right now. You know, and it was interesting to see Glenn be like, never mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we all know that Karen's just collecting her paychecks until she retires.
Well, thank you for that demonstration. I think it's an especially important one because it seems like often when people are trying to move away from punitive, they can accidentally land in permissive because they realize how important that respect and relationship is and kind of go too far that way without keeping that high expectation of behavior that makes it the with approach. So thanks for that demonstration, and thank you to all of the very beautiful demonstrations. Very well done. We debriefed a little bit throughout in terms of talking about what those different approaches, the impact is. But for kind of a final debrief question, I'd love to hear your reflections on how you could see yourself using this model in your own work as a restorative practitioner, and kind of acknowledging where you are showing up on the model and pushing yourself towards that with. So how could you see yourself using this model?
I think for me, one of the places I try to use it with is, without going into it in any detail, is to present in a group with like a scenario whenever I'm doing something around the training and what we ask is, what's your immediate response to this situation? You know, if you were here, what would you be doing right now? Even right at the very beginning of a process. And then what I'd be doing is listening for the responses coming back from the group, and then being able to categorize them, you know, as long, well, listen here, this would be a 2 approach, this would be a thing approach, and then we would use that to kind of explore the window a bit further. That's how we'd use it in a training scenario. But.
Great.
I think it's helpful in the debrief after a conference as well, because we do address what's heavy with anybody, and it's an opportunity to support each other. And this is an extremely clean and clear model that we can fall back on to identify unconscious behavior on the part of the restorative team.
Definitely. It's so important to cultivate that ongoing self-reflection. Really.
I could imagine if I am preparing a conference participant or a representative or a stakeholder to come into a conference, I find it so valuable to not just talk about these concepts theoretically, but see them in action all next to each other. And so, yeah, depending on the time available and the willingness of the participant, I think it could be a really helpful way to this type of activity to introduce somebody into restorative practices or prepare them for what to expect in a restorative experience. I think it could be a fun way to engage in reflection, especially if someone's expressing any, I guess, concern or anxious anticipation of what a restorative conference might feel like.
Definitely. Yeah, I know some people benefit from a visual too.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I'm going to bring our reflection to a close for sake of time, but just one more reflection question to kind of carry forward with you from the day is to just think about when in your life you've experienced each of these 4 different approaches and what the impact was on you in experiencing that kind of on the receiving end, because I think that can be a really fruitful sort of reflection as well. So thank you so much, Jess, Ken, Karen, Abby, and Glenn for taking part in this demonstration with Kathleen and I. For our viewers, you can find instructions for how to play this game in person in the Little Book of Restorative Teaching Tools, and online and in-person instructions at restorativeteachingtools.com. So thanks so much.